How you doing, everyone? This is Matthias Atva from Dreadnought, your Dreadnought PS4 replay guy. And this is the RGM-79FD, the Robot Gundam Mass Production Type Year 79 Full Defense Armored GM. Yes, this is another grunt mech from the Earth Federation for Mobile Suit Gundam Battle Operation 2. And this is Gundam Sunday. This is a really good mobile suit and comes from an old PS2 game called Zeonic Front, which was a really good Gundam ground-based game. Now, there have been very few good space games, but luckily for PS3, PS2, there were a couple of really good ground games. And this is a very, very unique model GM. Now, if you've been listening to my previous videos, I've been explaining what a GM is. It's basically GM, short for Gundam Mass Production Type. It is a grunt mech. It is the mass-produced version of the Hero Mobile Suit, Hero Mech of the Gundam series, which is the Gundam itself. And the Federation pilots call it the GM for short, much the same way we would say Humvee or Jeep. And this was a mobile suit designed in response to a specific threat that the antagonists of the One-Year War series in Gundam, the Zeon, with their mobile suit, the Dom. Yes, one of the more famous bad guy mobile suits from Zeon is the Dom, and the Dom was a very fierce mobile suit indeed. When the war first started, the Zeon had one up on the Federation with mobile suits of their own, while the Federation did not have a mass production mobile suit type, just a couple prototypes, and they were long range and didn't do very well in combat against the Zeonic mobile suit type 5, the Zaku 1. The most iconic bad guy mobile suit of the Gundam series is the Zaku 2, and the other one is the Dom. In space, the Zeon used the Zaku 1 and Zaku 2 to great effect and defeated the starships of the Earth Federation, and then decided to invade Earth after bombing a bunch of colonies and enslaving a whole bunch of colonists around the Earth in their quest for freedom from the Earth Federation, allegedly. And then they decided to invade Earth to harness its natural resources and maybe conquer Earth and put the Earth Federation out of commission, and if not, to damage the Earth Federation's infrastructure so much on Earth that they simply could not continue the war, and this did not work out for them. Very quickly, once the Gundam was produced and a mass production variant was produced for the Earth Federation, it was found that the Zaku 2 and especially the Zaku 1 just weren't good enough anymore, and so new mobile suits had to be developed by Zeon to counter the threat of these mass-produced Gundams from the Earth Federation. Now, the Zaku 2 continued fighting the war for as long as the war lasted, and then up to a decade after, because A, it was a pretty solid mobile suit, although often outperformed by its rivals, and B, because the Zeon and later on the Neo Zeon and Zeon Remnant factions simply did not have the mass production capability of the planet Earth and could not produce enough mobile suits, and were stuck using old mobile suits in combat and just upgrading them the best that they could. The Zeon had a problem in which, even though they were a fascist dictatorship led by one family, they had two rival corporations that had their own selfish self-interests at heart to win favor of this family, which is the Zabi family, and each member of the Zabi family had their own agenda. So their research was very divided, and their resources were applied to a lot of experimental projects and a lot of mobile suit types, and this dragged down their economy. While because of the catastrophic losses suffered by the Earth Federation in the beginning of the war, the Federation, even though it was in theory a democracy, decided to make all the corporations of Earth and the Moon work for them under one wartime economy, one wartime research leadership. And because of this, the research was very focused and it highlighted mass production, easy repair, easy flying ability for both rookies and aces alike, and this is what led to the RGM-79 line of mobile suits, which are general purpose Gundam mass production type mobile suits, watered down versions of the Gundam. Even though the Zeon's research was very divided and unfocused, the Zimmond Company responded to the Zeonic Company's success of the Zaku's with the Dom. And the Dom is a giant, massive mobile suit with many, many thrusters, many engines, a huge power plant, and hover engines under the skirts of their legs, giving them this iconic, thick, bulky mobile suit, which may be easy to hit, but it had a lot of armor and was very, very fast. And this terrorized the Earth Federation forces. However, the Zeon could not conquer Earth with enough resources and troops, and they were eventually defeated by large land battleships, tanks, and the new ground-type GMs that were produced by the Earth Federation at the Battle of Odessa, and were kicked off Earth and decided to focus their efforts in space to gain their independence. However, the Dom survived on Earth with many various remnant and survivor groups, which were all veterans and aces by now from the Zeon, which were stuck and stranded on Earth. And before that, the Dom even gave the awesome Gundam, the iconic mobile suit of the series, a hard time because of its firepower, mobility, and armor. It's just that it was expensive and extremely hard to produce. So the GM line was divided into space variants and ground variants, and unfortunately all these ground variants, the Federation did not realize that the Zeon would be so easily defeated on Earth, and a lot of these ground variants got left in the dust and left behind while the Federation focused on what it needed, which was more space mobile suits. The Federation came out with the prototype GM, the light GM, and then the early type GM, the standard GM, and of course the GM space and command types, and GM cannons and GM snipers. While on the ground, the GMs had the ground variants, the cold district type, the ground version of the sniper, but they didn't have anything with the mobility to take on the Dom. They just threw numbers at these things, and a lot of times the Doms would get away. When the Zeon were defeated, a lot of the remnants of their forces that couldn't get off the planet to join their forces in space were stuck on the continents of Africa, Australia, and parts of Southeast Asia. It was very hard fighting these units and hunting them down. Southeast Asia had a lot of naval units and could hide like submarines, and in Africa and Australia, the Dom excelled at hit-and-run tactics in these planes and would fade in, fade out, were very hard to fight, and were very powerful and very strong units. So late in the war, the GM was reconstituted, and the ground-type GM was heavily researched to try and produce a mobile suit that could counter directly the Dom. And this is where we get the armored GM. They basically took the ground variant of the GM, put a bunch of thrusters on it and a bunch of armor, and gave it a bazooka. But the more they researched it and the more they, the very bureaucratic, red tape Earth Federation added to its design, it bogged down its production time, it bogged down its release date, and it also slowed it down. And at some point they just kept putting armor on it to make it stronger. And what we have is a GM that is only slightly faster and more mobile than a normal GM, but is incredibly heavily armored and can basically use just about any weapon it wants in combat. And even though many pilots use the Hyper Bazooka, many pilots also used just the standard machine gun, so it had an easier time hitting more mobile targets. And this is where we get the RGM-79 FD Armored GM. Unfortunately, the Armored GM didn't see much service. It came out late in the war. It did help to hunt down the Midnight Fenrir Corps, which is one of the remnants in Africa, and it used its speed and armor to great effect there. And even though the normal GMs and some of the armored GMs were defeated, took heavy losses, and the Midnight Fenrir Corps got away. Most of their mobile suits were destroyed and Africa was pacified. Other DOMs that survived the war, the ground variants of the DOMs, did survive at the Diamond Mine Division, but they were later defeated by newer mobile suits in the year Universal Century 83, and they were completely shattered and destroyed, and Africa was 100% pacified. At Torrington Base in Australia, many ground-based Earth DOMs used their mobility to terrorize Torrington Base, not once but twice. They were defeated, and then in the Gundam anime Gundam Unicorn, the rest of the remnant forces, which had a couple of surviving ground-based DOMs, attacked Torrington Base again and tried to attack Jabrao in South America, which is the capital of the Earth Federation, and the last of the ground-based DOMs were destroyed, and that was in Universal Century 96. So the DOM for ground combat met a similar end as the RGM-79FD in that they both lived and died on Earth, and their designs after the various conflicts kind of went nowhere because the fighting really gravitated away from Earth after the beginning of the 1 Year War. Once you got to the late stages of the 1 Year War and the decades after, Zeon, Neo Zeon, and any other antagonist for the Gundam series never really could invade Earth ever again after that first catastrophic failure of an invasion. And so ground-based high mobility type GMs were not really needed by the Earth Federation. However, the RGM-79FD did survive in a way in that it helped develop the later powered GM in Universal Century 83, and the powered GM led to development of full vernier Gundams and high mobility mobile suits for the Earth Federation much later on. So its legacy continues, but after the 1 Year War, the armored GM really didn't see much service, and what little service it saw was not particularly spectacular. It just helped mop up some of the remnants of Zeon in Africa. And that's okay. I still really like the mobile suit, and I got really lucky with my supply drops. Now, in my previous video, I mentioned you could buy many basic type of mobile suits with in-game cash, and I wanted to clarify that's not real money. That's like the way we have credits in Dreadnought or any other game. They're just accumulated reward points for completing PvP missions and for completing daily contracts and daily missions. So I didn't want anyone to think that you had to buy these mobile suits. You simply play the game and accumulate these credits, and many of the basic grunt mechs, the grunt mobile suits from the Earth Federation and Zeon and later Neo Zeon are available without you having to spend real money. If you want to spend real money, you buy additional tokens and get the loot box style supply drops. And at first that really turned me off, but I have to say I got really lucky. I spent, I believe, a total of $18 on the game so far, and my loot drops, most of them have been lackluster at best, but I got a few really good drops that suited me. I was very surprised how lucky I am to have gotten the Armored Gym, which is one of my favorite ground-based gyms, probably my favorite ground-based gym, and the GM Sniper 2, which is my favorite mobile suit in the Universal Century Gundam timeline. Now, what happened to the DOM, you may ask if you're interested? Well, the Zimmond Company, once the Zeon were defeated on Earth and the war moved back into space as the Earth Federation gained resources, equipment, momentum, and used their population and industrial capacity to overpower Zeon. Once the war moved into space, they said, hey, look at this ground unit that's big, beefy, tanky, and uses all these hover jets and thrusters to get around fast. What if we replace those ground atmospheric-based thrusters with space boosters, space rockets? We might still have a very good mobile suit, and that's where we get the Rick Dom and the Rick Dom 2. The Rick Dom 2, or the upgraded Dom in space, I don't know what Rick stands for. I never figured that out. I looked everywhere when I was younger saying, what does this stand for? And I never really could find it, but it's the Rick Dom. I don't know why they named it Rick. I guess Richard really likes the Dom. But anyway, the Rick Dom survived the ground combat, and its legacy continued much further than the Armored Gem. And even though the Armored Gem was made to counteract the regular ground-based Dom, a similar design was never made for space, as the Earth Federation chose to make lighter, easily mass-producible, easily maintenanced mobile suits that were very easygoing on the pilots, very easy to learn and train on, very quick, carried a big shield, usually carried either a good machine gun or a lighter powered beam weapon, and just threw numbers at them and used pilot survivability and pilot experience to get the better of the Zeon forces. But the DOMs were usually reserved for at least veteran or even ace pilots. One of the most powerful and most feared aces of the Zeon forces used the Rick Dom with a large beam cannon as its main weapon, and did very well with it, shooting down over 100 mobile suits and several capital ships. And that would be the dreaded Anivel Gato, and I could go into him in a later episode. But just for now, know that the Rick Doms continued. They couldn't be produced in the numbers needed to bolster the Zeon forces, but they were given to veteran and elite pilots and survived the war and made a return with the remnants of Zeon during Operation Stardust in Universal Century 83, and some models were even used by remnant forces and Neo-Zeon forces after the one-year war in Operation Stardust. And then during the civil war of the Earth Federation called the Titans conflict, the design was revamped and used by the rebels, who were the good guys in Zeta Gundam, against the now tyrannical Earth Federation in that timeline during the mid to late Universal Century 80s. And that was the Rick Diaz. And the Rick Diaz was piloted by Zeon forces that survived the war and joined the good guys against the now corrupt and overbearing Titans of the Earth Federation. Once the bad guys in the Earth Federation were defeated and the government was returned to its previous incarnation of just being a kind of good but mainly neutral, corrupt but democratic government, the design kind of faded away until the Neo-Zeon group called the Sleeves made a return in Gundam Unicorn, and we saw their mobile suit, the Dowage, which is just basically a super modernized, super beefed up Rick Dom. So the Dom legacy is still alive and good in the Gundam universe, and unfortunately the Armored Gem kind of fell off. But you can see here I did very well, got a 6-0 in the first replay, and the second replay got a, I believe, 5-0. And I got really lucky. When I joined, I got the 10 mobile suit pack for Westerners that start playing the game. I believe that was late summer, early fall. And if you want to start playing the game, you should do it now so you can get those 10 free mobile suits at no cost to you. And one of them was the level 2 Armored Gem. And that helped me get past a couple battles in the high point range. I was still outclassed, but I was able to use its armor and mobility to my advantage and get a lot of points out of that, which helped me get other mobile suits like the GM Kai, which you saw yesterday. And then in my first 10-pack loot drop, which cost me $8, I got both the Armored Gem level 3 and Armored Gem level 1, which means I had all 3 levels, and I have a really good mobile suit that I not only like the history of, but I also like the way it handles in battle. You can see it's very smooth, only moderately quicker than other mobile suits, but it has excellent armor and a pretty good high-powered autocannon, the 100mm machine gun, and it does quite well for me. And that means I don't have to switch mobile suits in ground combat. I get into my zone and I have a really good play time. And I'm very happy that I scored all 3 levels of the Armored Gym. It's probably just luck that I got one of my favorite ground-based mobile suits from the Universal Century Gundam universe. Well, I think this will about do it for Gundam Sunday. I hope you enjoyed the Armored Gym. You're probably going to see a little more of it until I get other mobile suits leveled up in the game. But I did quite well, and next weekend we'll be taking a look at the other side of things as I take the MS-6 Zaku 2 heavy arms into combat, and you'll see how the Zeon like to play when they're on Earth. Well, that'll be it from me for now, and I'll see you soon in Sinley Bay.